As the sun dipped low over the plains of southern Italy in August 216 BC, the battlefield of Cannae lay silent beneath the weight of catastrophe. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers lay dead, their once invincible legions shattered in one of the most devastating defeats in military history. At the center of this triumph stood Hannibal Barca, commander of a multinational army that had just humiliated Rome at the height of its power. To later generations, the situation seems obvious. Rome had lost nearly an entire army. Panic rippled through the Republic. The road to the city itself appeared open. Why then? Did Hannibal not march on Rome and end the war in a single stroke? The answer is far more complex than a simple missed opportunity. Hannibal's decision was rooted not in hesitation or fear, but in strategy, logistics, political calculation, and a profound, though incomplete, understanding of Roman psychology. A victory without precedent. The Battle of Cannae was not merely a win, it was a masterpiece. Hannibal deliberately allowed his weaker center to bend inward, drawing the Roman legions forward. As they pressed the attack, his African infantry closed in from the flanks, while his cavalry sealed the rear. The result was a complete encirclement, an annihilation. Never before had Rome suffered such losses in a single day. Entire families were wiped out. Senators perished alongside common soldiers. For many in Hannibal's camp, the war seemed effectively won. According to later accounts, his cavalry commander Hannibal famously urged immediate action, claiming that within days Hannibal could feast as victor on the Capitoline Hill. Hannibal refused. Centuries later, the Roman historian Livy would argue that this choice saved Rome itself. Yet, to judge Hannibal by hindsight alone is to misunderstand the realities he faced. Rome was not an easy prize. Despite the disaster at Cannae, Rome was far from defenseless. The city's massive walls were manned by citizens, reserves, and surviving troops. Its grain stores were vast. A direct assault without proper siege equipment would have been suicidal. Hannibal's army, though brilliant in battle, was not built for prolonged sieges. He lacked heavy siege engines, sufficient manpower to surround the city completely, and secure supply lines to sustain a long blockade. Any attempt to besiege Rome would have pinned his forces in place, precisely what Roman strategy sought to achieve. More dangerously, Rome could still raise new armies. Even after Cannae, the Republic demonstrated an almost terrifying capacity to replace losses. A stalled Hannibal outside Rome's walls would have been vulnerable to fresh legions converging from multiple directions, fighting on Roman terms. Hannibal's most devastating victories were never the result of raw numerical strength. They came from control of terrain, timing, and psychology. At Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, Hannibal forced Roman commanders to fight battles they believed they could win, only to discover too late that they had been lured into carefully prepared traps. He understood Roman confidence and impatience, and he exploited it relentlessly. Marching on Rome would have stripped him of these advantages. Any engagement near the city would have been dictated entirely by Roman priorities. The surrounding landscape was familiar to Roman forces, heavily fortified, and supported by short, secure supply lines. Hannibal's army, by contrast, would have been operating far from friendly territory, without siege equipment, and increasingly dependent on foraging in hostile lands. Most importantly, Rome would not be compelled to fight on Hannibal's terms. The Senate could simply refuse battle, forcing him into a prolonged siege he could not sustain. Hannibal knew that his strength lay in speed, flexibility, and deception, not in grinding attritional warfare against a state that could replace its losses indefinitely. A march on Rome would have required him to abandon the very style of warfare that had made him successful, turning his greatest strengths into liabilities. Hannibal's real strategy. From the outset of the campaign, Hannibal Barca did not believe Rome could be defeated through battlefield victories alone. This belief was shaped by the experience of his father, Hannibal Barca, who had watched Rome endure staggering losses during the First Punic War without ever considering surrender. Rome, Hannibal concluded, could absorb punishment on a scale unmatched by any other Mediterranean power. Hannibal therefore pursued an indirect strategy. Rather than attempting to destroy Rome itself, he sought to hollow it out from within by dismantling the alliance system that sustained its military dominance. Rome's power rested not only on its citizens, but on a vast network of Italian allies who supplied manpower, food, and logistical support. Roughly half of Rome's armies were composed of these allied contingents. If they could be persuaded to defect, Rome's military machine would collapse. To achieve this, Hannibal positioned himself as a liberator, rather than a conqueror. He released prisoners captured from allied communities without ransom. He promised autonomy, lighter obligations, and freedom from Roman domination. In theory, this approach was sound. Many Italian communities resented Rome's demands for troops, its uneven distribution of spoils, and the lack of political equality within the alliance system. What Hannibal underestimated was not their grievances, but their fear of Rome. The Roman way of war. Rome's response to defeat was shaped by a philosophy of warfare fundamentally different from that of its rivals. In Greek and Punic traditions, wars were often resolved after a decisive battle, followed by negotiated settlements that preserved the defeated state's autonomy. Rome rejected this model entirely. For the Romans, war was existential. Victory meant absolute domination. Defeat meant extinction. This mentality had been reinforced over generations. The campaigns of Pyrrhus, who defeated Roman armies repeatedly yet failed to break Roman resolve, became legendary examples of Rome's refusal to compromise. Even catastrophic losses did not weaken Roman morale, they hardened it. To the Roman elite, surrender, even under favorable terms, was unthinkable. The concept of libertas was inseparable from Roman identity. To submit to a foreign power was not merely political defeat, it was the loss of what it meant to be Roman. Hannibal understood Roman pride and stubbornness, but even he failed to grasp how deeply this ideology permeated Roman society. From senators to common legionaries, Romans were prepared to endure starvation, devastation, and death rather than accept foreign rule. Why Rome's allies stayed loyal? Hannibal expected Rome's allies to rebel once Roman weakness became undeniable. Instead, most remained loyal. Rome maintained this loyalty through a calculated blend of reward and terror. Allied elites were woven into Roman society through patronage networks that extended across politics, commerce, and marriage. While these elites lacked formal citizenship, they benefited materially and socially from their connections to Roman power. At the same time, Rome demonstrated, with ruthless clarity, the cost of betrayal. When Capua, the most prominent city to defect to Hannibal, was recaptured in 211 BCE, Rome responded with exemplary brutality. Leading citizens were executed, nobles imprisoned, and large portions of the population sold into slavery. The city itself was stripped of political institutions and reduced to a hollow administrative shell under Roman control. The lesson was unmistakable. Loyalty brought protection and privilege, defection brought annihilation. After Capua's destruction, the prospect of siding with Hannibal became far less appealing. Even communities sympathetic to his cause calculated that Rome's vengeance was a greater threat than Hannibal's promises. Victory without reinforcements. Hannibal remained undefeated in Italy for over a decade, winning several more battles and repeatedly outmaneuvering Roman generals. Yet he could not replace his losses. Carthage failed to provide adequate reinforcements or sustained logistical support. Rome adapted. Rather than seeking decisive engagements, Roman commanders avoided direct confrontation. They shadowed Hannibal, harassed his supply lines, attacked his allies, and slowly strangled his position. Hannibal found himself trapped, too strong to defeat outright, too weak to finish the war. Scipio enters the stage. The balance finally shifted when Rome produced a commander capable of matching Hannibal's brilliance, Scipio Africanus. Scipio studied Hannibal's methods and adopted them: deception, surprise, psychological warfare. He carried the war to Spain and then to North Africa itself, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy and return home. Their meeting at the Battle of Zama marked the only time Hannibal lost a pitched battle. Defeated on Carthaginian soil by a Roman who had learned from him, Hannibal knew the war was over. Hannibal's true legacy. Hannibal failed to destroy Rome, but he permanently changed it. To defeat him, Rome bent its own rules, granting Scipio extraordinary commands and rewarding soldiers with land. These precedents weakened the Republic's constitutional foundations and accelerated its transformation into an imperial power. The contradictions Hannibal exposed between Republican ideals and imperial ambition would eventually tear Rome apart from within. So, did Hannibal make the wrong choice? With hindsight, it is tempting to say yes. But judged in his own time, Hannibal's decision not to march on Rome was rational, informed, and strategically sound. He lost not because he failed to seize a city, but because he faced an enemy uniquely unwilling to accept defeat, and a homeland unable or unwilling to fully support its greatest general. Hannibal did not misunderstand warfare. He misunderstood Rome. And that misunderstanding changed the course of history. Hannibal didn't lose because he lacked genius. He lost because he fought an enemy that refused to accept defeat. Rome survived not through brilliance, but through endurance, fear, and relentless resolve. And in surviving Hannibal, it became something far more dangerous. If you want more untold stories of history's greatest minds and turning points, like and subscribe to the channel.